And then there was only one. Masaki having been taken by Sakuya, and Choshiro long dead, it's now left up to Ruka to try to uncover the final mysteries of Rogotsu Island and try to lift the hanging curse that's been on this island for so many years. And that has taken us all the way back to Ruka's ancestral home as she tried to follow the ghost of her dead father, Soyea. And indeed, that is going to be the same ghost we are going to be initially following as we head further and further into this old-style house. Yeah, there are a few other avenues for us to go. But there is a very specific reason that we do want to follow Soyea before we start exploring too much. Because inevitably, he was leading us down to this particular door at the end of the hallway here. But indeed, before we can venture in, we do have to get rid of the magical talismans locking the door. And to get rid of these talismans, we had to find matching talismans on a number of masks that are scattered throughout the house here. Thing is that those talismans will not appear until you interact with the door, so if you try to get them ahead of time, well, you won't actually be able to get them at all. But yeah, there's also a nice little cache of blue crystals here, because as we are now stuck to just Ruka, we can now focus all of our upgrades on her camera specifically, and we are going to want to upgrade her camera fully, because things are going to get quite a bit more difficult, especially considering that this is the second to last chapter. But now that we can start exploring fully, first room we want to hit up is what appears to be something of a room to host guests. Number of little, I guess, mats or pillows on the tatami mats. And along with that Type 61 film, there is one lingering guest that managed to stay behind. And she can be pretty easy to miss, because she is just hiding in plain sight. And considering that this is a new area, this place is just absolutely littered with Hazuki dolls to find. And these can be kind of difficult to find, especially if you're just in a rush to get through what could be a kind of difficult area of the game. But yeah, this first door we bypassed is, well, it looks like it could easily be a guest bedroom of sorts. Though on the desk here, there is some light reading material about the Yomasuke family. They apparently were the ones that had been making the masks that had been the tradition of Rogotsu Island for quite some time. Specifically, Soutsu was a very skilled mask maker, and his masks were just known throughout Japan, even requested by the emperor himself. But due to some unknown circumstances, one of his masks led to the Day Without Suffering, and thus the whole mask-making tradition kind of went to the wayside until much later on. That's when it became more of a less of a religious activity and more of just a remembrance of their past culture. But yeah, the reason you want to make sure to head into this room, not bypass it, is because it does hold our first talisman. Indeed, it holds probably one of the more difficult normal enemies of the game, and one of the reasons why I consider the house here to be a pretty difficult area. Now, this particular ghost, I think, is meant to be the mask maker's apprentice, or at least I think that's what he's called in the game. And he does primarily attack by grabbing you and pounding you in the face with a chisel. But while he doesn't have that much in the way of health, his serpentining attack pattern does make things especially hard. Because he'll pretty much wait till he's right up in your face, and then suddenly he'll juke off to a direction, and you'll lose some of your charge. And if you're not ready, he will only cause you about 1/3 of your health and damage. Thankfully, though, he is a little bit limited with his range of attacks. He does have one other attack that we will be seeing later, but for the most part, he does focus on using a grab, so he is pretty easy to dodge. So we've gotten rid of that first talisman, and we did pick up some reading material, but there is one final thing you want to make sure and get in this bedroom. Yep, it is another Hazuki doll. It especially helps once you do realize exactly what that chime sounds like, because as you might have noticed in a couple of videos past, I did seemingly just not hear that sound at all. But yeah, we can now press further into the household here, this adjacent door. And it's with this door that I think we start to get just I guess almost a feeling of the size of the overall house here. Though, before we start searching his expanses further, we should make sure to pick up this phone call. Now, the voice I'm assuming you're meant to hear there is supposed to be Ruka's mother, Soyea. The question, though, is what indeed she left behind for Ruka. I'm sure we'll find out soon enough, but for that last 20 and now this 10 blue crystals, we can now max out our power. And both the combination of the speed increase and the power increase means that, well, we are going to be a force to be reckoned with. And in all honesty, those are pretty much the real upgrades you want to get. Also, hey, we already found the second talisman, though before we do that, we find some very nice Type 90 film in the cupboard. along with a Hazuki doll that was guarding it. And I do kind of recommend getting those items in that doll before you interact with the talisman here for a very specific reason. That's because almost immediately you are going to want to give chase after Ruka's mother. Also, you might notice that things have kind of had their color drowned out, and it is a nice little atmospheric touch to what's going on. Because as we follow Ruka's mother, we are going to be going down a very familiar path, especially if you recognize this outside garden here. Might recall, probably 4 or 5 chapters ago, as we were playing as Ruka, and after having played a familiar tone on the piano, we did get transported to this area, though there are a few new additions that weren't here before. Some of which are quite a few Hazuki dolls. But along with the Hazuki dolls that we will find scattered all about in all the different rooms, well, there is also some new reading material that we can pick up, such as some family secrets. Now here it goes a little bit more into, I guess, the ceremony of passage and what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to commune with the afterlife. There's supposed to be some connection between the living hosts, or the Utsuwa, and, the afterlife. They're supposed to, well, I think the Utsuwa is supposed to channel a particular spirit from the afterlife, and somehow or another, the Utsuwa's soul is also supposed to, return afterwards. It's just, it doesn't really get into specifics about how that's supposed to happen. Sadly, it seems that even going to the source, which is, I guess, Ruka's family roots, still doesn't really give us a exact science in regards to this ritual. Also, yet again, you don't want to keep an ear open for that chime. Because you might feel very inclined to just rush along this familiar linear path that doesn't have that much going on, but obviously you would be missing out on all these sweet cursed dolls. Now the thing is, as you do make your way up to the upper floor, you can start to hear a very, very familiar piano tune playing. And we do indeed know where that piano is. So that's where we want to head first. So we stumble across Sayaka and Ruka playing together so very long ago. And as you might be able to guess, it's time to uncover more memories with an expanded piano tune. Now, this is exactly as it's been done, I think, twice before. Just we are expanding from, I think, 2 sets of notes to now 3 sets of notes. I don't believe these are called stanzas. I think stanzas are entirely new lines of music.
So, 上手ね。ねえルカ、もっと上手に弾けるようになったらルカにあげたいものがあるの。
And it's with those newly uncovered memories and the soothing voice of Ruka's mother that we are given flashes of exactly what Ruka's mother wanted to give Ruka. But we also do find some additional reading material here, just going into childhood Ruka's mindset, where she is told by her mother, I guess, about the overall lineage of their family and how very special it is. And I think Ruka tries her best to understand that, moms and dads, grandmothers and grandfathers, but underneath all that, Sayaka was also meaning just the overall connection to that they also have to the afterlife. But more importantly, in the end there, all Ruka really wanted was just to have a happy childhood with both her mom and her dad. Sadly, along with what we already know transpired, this Hazuki doll probably wasn't helping any of that. But yeah, with all those flashes, you might have been able to tell that where we need to head to next is back into Sayaka's bedroom, which thankfully is pretty close to being nearby. So along with that minor jump scare, we find a mirror. And along with that mirror, we also find a fairly short document that goes over the purpose of the mirror. Seems that the Tsukimori family has a special song that they hand down from daughter to mother, etc. And once you have learned that song, you then get to have ownership of the mirror. And I guess the mirror is supposed to help you remember something. Still, before we place the mirror, there are a couple of items we're gonna want to go ahead and pick up first. First, we get even more Type 90 film. But more importantly, at the head of the bed here, we do get a letter from Ruka's Ruka's mother to her father. She goes more into the purpose of the song and, I guess, the overall background of her family. She didn't really want to keep her family's background a secret. It's just that, I don't want to say there was a stigma, but there was a thought that the Tsukimori clan were kind of quiet people, not really up for socializing. And instead of being thought of as that, she instead wanted to just be thought of as a normal woman, to have a normal family, and just live happy, full lives together, But she still has, almost arcane knowledge. She goes about, the lunar melody that we have heard about in some of the documents in the underground area. And the fact that they do give off special reverberations, and that lunar melody, well, it can either be alone and very weak, or be in a family and be very strong. I think it was inevitably her hope that Ruka and her and Soyea would make a very strong melody. Seems though she might not have had such pleasant dreams with this Hazuki doll by her pillow. But the one final thing of importance in here before we place the mirror back down is the final talisman. And with that, the door that Soyea went into should now be unlocked. But first things first, time to replace the mirror here. And it is from the mirror that we see a very strange diagram. Reflected by the moonlight, we see what appears to be the different phases of the moon, going from, I guess, an eclipse to full, to waxing and waning. There's also a mention that it has something to do with a musical score, and I assume that's supposed to be the inner circles of the diagram itself. Yeah, I think there was a previous mention of a, probably going to mispronounce it, but Gesho machine. And it might be that that diagram has some coinciding with that previously mentioned machine. Still, before we worry about delving into that too much further, since that door is now unlocked, we can see, well, I guess just what Soyea was rushing off into a room to look further into. And for the most part, it is a pretty, well, safe and quick trip back. Though that isn't to say it's not without some bit of danger. And we'll see in just a second, but we do have another visit from the chisel-wielding mask maker's apprentice here. And as you can imagine, tiny corridors are not the best place to fight him in. Instead, I think you might have better luck just getting into the little foyer area where I think you had unsealed that second mask, I think. Also, we do finally get a glimpse of the Mask Maker's Apprentice's second attack, which is that he will send out a small projectile. Looks like a little floating mask. And while it doesn't do that much damage, it will home in on you. And, if you do manage to do a fully charged shot against the Mask Maker's Apprentice, it will cause the projectile to dissipate. So it's good to keep that in mind, and hopefully make sure that you did upgrade that speed stat for your camera. Still, outside of the bad environment to fight this guy in, he did manage to get down his range of attacks from before. He is pretty much the exact same, so you're either going to continue to have a bad time fighting him, or, I don't know, maybe things will be kind of easy for you. But with that small speed bump out of the way, we can now continue on to that mysterious door that had previously been sealed. And what we find behind the door doesn't seem that impressive on a surface level. But indeed, there are some very useful items hidden away in what appears to be a workshop of sorts, or at least a little library. First thing we can find is hidden behind this mask here. Because hidden underneath it, we get a Lunar melody sheet music, which looks a lot like that diagram that we uncovered with the mirror, but it is slightly different. Yeah, we can learn here that Soyea seems to know how to get into the underground Lunar Hall, but it requires the ancient score, which had previously been thought to be missing, but was uncovered by the Haibara family on the island. And it's that lunar score that we are going to use to get into that altar that we found in the previous chapter in that antechamber. And while that is going to be our next location, there are a few more items of interest that we want to make sure and not overlook in this room. Now, while we can't look at that old scroll there that Soyea was looking at, instead, we can pick up one of the handmaiden's masks, along with something that I guess Soyea was using to decode that lunar melody, and that I guess he then made into that lunar sheet music that we found hidden away underneath that mask. it's with all this secrecy, along with this particular note, that we really start to question exactly what Soyea was hoping to accomplish here. It seems that he was wanting to maybe right the wrongs of his ancestors by making a better mask, or maybe he was hoping for some control over people's minds, as Mr. Haibara seems to have implanted this idea that, the mask can control people's mental state. More than anything, though, it seems that he was just using Sayaka and her overall family line to get a hold of this information and try to manipulate it for his own ends. It's a bit questionable at this point, but all signs kind of point to something was a bit amiss with Ruka's father. But with this one final Hazuki doll, we are pretty much done with Ruka's house, and that means that we need to head all the way over to the antechamber, see if we can't open or try to operate that mysterious altar that we could feel a breeze from before. Now, it is quite a bit of a trip. Thankfully, though, it is not an entirely uneventful one. And we're going to run across quite a few vanishing ghosts as we make our way over there. And you might be a bit confused by the almost jovial state of the islanders here, but I can only assume that, maybe if it was the night of the Kagura, they were in very high spirits, hoping that, maybe the taboos and poor luck of the island were going to be turned around. Probably by a lot of sweet words and overconfidence from Ruka's father about the state of the mask he made. We can also find a few more red crystals waiting for us. Though, as I kind of mentioned before, I usually prefer just to use the more powerful single-shot lenses rather than try to use the, status ailment inflicting lenses like slow or knockback. But yeah, the reason that I thought that these ghosts might be, reenacting the night of the Kagura itself is also the appearance of the Kanedas, or the handmaidens here. Probably freshly donning the mask they might have just gotten from Ruka's father. But it's always fun to try to piece together the current storyline, or I guess in this case, portion of the timeline that Ruka might be stumbling into. It seemed like previously, when we had been going down these hallways in the opposing direction, Soyu's father, or Ruka's father Soyu, is running back into his little workshop where we found the door locked. But it was a bit hard to tell where he was coming from in that circumstance, because he was already at the end of the hallway, so couldn't really tell if he was coming from down here. I don't think he was in the Shrine Maiden's Hall where the Kagura was going on, though.
この奥にずっとずっと奥深く深く
Trip to the antechamber was mostly, safe and uneventful. Once we reached the antechamber itself, attacked yet again by the 5 handmaidens of the Kagura, and hopefully you made sure to pick up on that tell of which one will attack you, because it is pretty much the exact same as the previous encounter we had. And if you've been making sure to pick up all of the blue crystals and the red crystals, your camera should be more fully powered up, and they can be pretty easily taken down. Though the damage they cause is still nothing to be scoffed at. Especially if you were having any troubles fighting the Mask Maker's apprentice, additional damage you'll take from this fight would easily mean your death. In fact, I came very close to dying here, though I still have a reasonable assortment of healing items. And while I also do have a reasonable assortment of upgraded film, I don't really feel it's super necessary for this fight. I actually find that the smaller room size here makes fighting them a little bit more easier, even though, considering all the pillars, it probably should be more difficult. It could just be that, the increased capabilities of Ruka's camera, or just the added practice of having previously fought these little girls. Overall, this fight feels a lot easier than our previous run-in with them. But while I deal with this final handmaiden, I guess it is good to bring up that strange memory that Ruka managed to uncover as we entered the room here. It seems that Dr. Haibara did drag her away from the Kagura going on upstairs, and took her down to a somewhat similar place that it looked like Masaki had been taken. But with the handmaidens now taken care of, it's now time to see if we can't solve the mystery of the altar here. First thing we want to do is place that mask that we found. And by placing that mask, we can now mess with this dial here. Now, the mystery of the dial is pretty easily solved. They do allow you to look at that diagram that we found in Soyu's office. And all we have to do is simply match up the design on the sheet music here, and match that up with the dial itself. And with the altered moves, we now have access to another brand new area. And speaking of those images and memories that we saw regarding Masaki and Ruka, Seems we have stumbled directly into those mysterious passages. Before I head down there, though, might as well go ahead and restock up on those herbal medicines that I used. I mean, I have, like 1.8 million points, so I think I can probably spend 20,000 to just restock a bit. Never really know, might be waiting down here for us. Oh, it is good to know from our visions that we are on the right track. But, well, you do want to keep an eye out for your filament, because along with those visions, there are a few little items hidden away in the walls down here. Nothing too amazing, just a few upgrade items here and there. I will say, though, that some of the vanishing ghosts that you will run into this area can be a little bit troublesome, mostly because they are in motion, and that motion is normally heading downstairs, which is a bit different from most of the vanishing ghosts we've had to run into previously. Most of them, I'd say, are pretty much running on a level plane or completely stationary. So, if you are trying to get as many of the vanishing ghosts as possible, this area can actually be pretty troublesome for that. Still, with this very large assortment of crystals, we can now start to upgrade some of the lesser stats. Say Absorb is pretty good. It means that we can get off more of the power lens, I think, zero shots, which have actually been proven to be pretty useful so far. I think they almost triple the amount of damage we're able to do with a single shot. Also, upgrading capacity means that we might be able to get off at least, I'd say, one more zero shot before we run out of spirit energy. And reload, well, might just help us in the future whenever we're using more higher end film. Don't really have to worry too much about the reloading speed when you're using just the basic film. Still, as we have head deeper and deeper underground, it's only just now that I think we have finally stumbled into somewhat familiar territory. In fact, I think this was the exact passageway that probably led to Masaki's inevitable doom. Though I suppose it's a question now if Ruka is going to face the same fate that she had to face as a child, as Yu Haibara led her to that horrible fate deep underground here with his sister Sakuya. Hopefully, though, we can manage to do something to avoid that horrible outcome. Though there are a couple things we do want to indulge in before we go through those cursed doors. First thing is, we want to go ahead and miss out on some upgrade items, which is completely fine. I think we've been doing pretty good so far in that realm. Next thing is, well, I don't think there was anything in this Torii gate before. at least when we were down here as Masaki. But just something inside me was fairly certain that there had to be something up in here. I mean, it does seem like a very prime spot to hide a Hazuki doll, and it could very well be that maybe the developers decided to do something a little tricky and maybe put the Hazuki doll just slightly outside of range for the chime feature. I mean, it really looks like there could be one somewhere hidden up in the ceiling or maybe on top of the gate there, because I was fairly certain there was one in this area somewhere. In reality, though, it is not hidden away in that gate. Instead, it's hidden very, very sneakily up in the rafters over in this area. I mean, the chime function is still working, but yeah, if you were trying to look for that particular doll, you'd probably end up like me and be very confused about its location. But with all that out of the way, it's time to press forward into our fated destination. Though yet again, you might be hearing that chime, and yeah, it is a very, very sneaky doll that's very easy to miss. And as you can imagine, you don't come down to this area too often, so if you do miss out on the opportunity to catch those two dolls, you're going to kind of be kicking yourself later on. But yeah, on to the main stage. Now, we did venture down here as Masaki, but we didn't get too much time to explore. Though we are able to get onto the stage now. So on the ground, We find another fragment of the black mask that Choshiro had given us a portion previously. We also find Miya, Masaki's doll on the ground here, though no sight nor sound nor fragment remaining of Masaki herself. In fact, there's nothing really left else for us to find down here. I feel like the answers that we are searching for are probably in the place that Yu Haibara could have found those answers as well. And that was with Ruka's father, who was not at either ceremony. The problem is that Sakuya is apparently not very happy that we came down into the underground Lunar Hall here. And as opposed to the run-in that both Choshiro and Masaki had with Sakuya, Ruka is not going to be able to do any damage to Sakuya in her current form. In fact, I think this is one of those circumstances where if Sakuya does manage to get a hold of you, she will just instantly kill you. So, this on the surface can seem like a very tense moment, and it probably is on higher difficulties. Because on higher difficulties, I think the ghosts are a lot more aggressive, and they will be more than happy to do their attacks more often than on normal or easy. So if you are playing on normal, honestly all you really have to do is keep running forward and you should be in absolutely no danger. Though if you are worried at all, that dodge function is fairly easy to use. I think the one thing that can make this a little bit difficult is if in the black and white and hazy filter going on, you might get a little bit turned around. But in all reality, it's pretty straight shot upwards. Yeah, as we are making our way back up to the surface, I guess it would be prudent to kind of point out what was shown in that cutscene that we saw deep underground there. And that was the fact that the ritual that Yu was trying to do, as well as his father was trying to do, yeah, they managed to try to pull off a ritual at somewhat at the same time. It could be that Director Haibara was more than likely ignorant of what Yu was trying to do, and maybe those two ceremonies managed to interact with each other in a negative way, and I don't know, maybe that's what caused the mask to crack. Or it could have been that, they didn't follow all the necessary steps to make sure the ritual was successful, and that's what caused it to go awry. Or it could very well be that Soyea did have, like I mentioned before, some ulterior motive with all this. Maybe he meant for the ritual to fail in the first place. Seems that there was definitely some reason that he made a point of saying to both, I think both Director Haibara and his son, that he was not going to be at either of the rituals, even though one of those rituals was going to involve his daughter. So it points even more to the fact that Soyea indeed seemed to have something he was trying to hide. And that's exactly why we are going to head over to his workshop. But yeah, it is nice to finally get all the moving pieces of this very complicated story down. The fact that, there were multiple rituals going on, different backstabbing methods going on between both members of the Haibara patriarchy. And that even though both of them were probably inevitably trying to go towards the same root goal of curing Luna Sedata, just didn't seem like both of them were trying to be on the level with each other about the methods and means they were trying to go for in regards to solving that disease. Yeah, you might recall last time around that the door to Soyu's workshop were indeed locked. But there is a new item we can find on the altar here that I think will be the final key to unlocking that workshop. And it's the final piece of this mysterious black mask that I think Sakuya had to wear, and that inevitably failed. With all three pieces, though, we should now be able to get inside the workshop. The question is, what exactly did Ruka uncover in her father's workshop? So it appears that Ruka's father was working on a very special mask, probably specifically made for Ruka herself. And it's that exact mask that I think the enemy encounter with Ruka's father that he tries to shove onto Ruka's face in a very violent manner. Boss encounter here with Ruka's father can initially seem to be a little bit daunting, but at its core it's very much the same, if not a bit easier than the same fight that we had with the Mask Maker's apprentice. He does have a projectile attack, and he also does have a grab attack where he will lunge at you. The fatal frame timing on that can be a little bit strange because he does kind of reel back. And once he gets low enough on health, he will try to revert to a slightly differently timed grab attack, but at its core, it's still very much just a projectile and just a grab attack. So, in the end, it's not that difficult to overcome.